The nativists, driven by hatred, pushed forward through anything in their way, knocking over statues, signs, Irish people even. They set fire to a nearby house and the family stood there in complete innocence and terror. The eradicating flames gleamed among their eyes, casting eerie and menacing shadows. "Protect the church," Bishop Kenrick implored, his voice trembling with determination to save his beloved place. Our community rallied, forming a human barrier between the church and the advancing mob, who were screaming out many cruel things towards us Irish people. The fire raged, its ferocious flames reaching for the heavens that us Irish looked up every second of our day. The heavens themselves seemed to weep alongside us as the desperate cries of the faithful merged with the crackling inferno. I stood there side by side with my neighbor and helpless and heartbroken, watching the church that held our hopes and dreams crumble into ashes.
As the fateful wheel of fortune continued to turn, the groans of its victims grew louder and more numerous. Amidst a sea of complaints and protests, an officer's voice suddenly pierced through the chaos, calling out a name.
Dylan Meyer!
My heart sank. As more names got called, the officers struggled to maintain order near the wheel. While others hurriedly evacuated the building with the draft documents, I tried to run for the documents, but the crowd was impenetrable.
Amid the warm summer of 1848, Seneca Falls, New York, bore witness to a gathering that would etch its name into eternity. I found myself amidst the crowd, eager to participate in what would become a pivotal moment in the fight for women's rights. In her opening words, Stan states, "The time has come, my sisters and brothers, to finally challenge the injustices we've endured for far too long. We are gathered here today because we understand that women are not inferior to men, and that we are entitled to the same rights and privileges as our male counterparts."
In her opening words, Stanton states,
"The time has come, my sisters and brothers, to finally challenge the injustices we've endured for far too long. We've gathered here today because we understand that women are not inferior to men, that we are entitled to the same rights and privileges as our male counterparts."
I later argued that women were equal to men, endowed by God with the same inalienable rights. Also, I showed and deplored how society had systemically oppressed women, often rendering them unaware of the extent of their degradation. For centuries, the chains of subjugation had bound them. Then I ventured into the realm of men supposed of intellectual superiority. It was premature to gauge women's intellectual capabilities because they had never been given a fair chance.
Days turned into weeks, weeks then turned into months. The search for gold plagued me and the inhabitants throughout the lawless desert of California. The Bodie district was the only place us prospectors and Argonauts could go without being surrounded by corporations that practically owned the abundant land. Cities like Columbia, Yerba Buena, and New Helvetia were quickly bought by these massive gold mining corporations. Advanced machinery like drills and explosives stood tall behind them. My primitive and makeshift equipment cowered in comparison to the formidable Damascus steel drills and axes of the industry giants. What was left was poor prospectors like me, were ghost towns that had been ransacked and ravaged by major corporations. Hills caved in and pans full of muddy water filled the area.
October 1848, almost 5 years ago since I've been held captive to the life of the Argonaut. 5 years ago since I saw that flyer. 5 years ago since I've seen my family. First mention of gold being found in the West came from the paper. Advertisements filled the front pages and enticed countless young men such as myself to strike for fortune and build a better life for themselves. In a land full of opportunity, to live the American dream. But how could this be the American dream? I muttered under my breath as I wedged the dynamite into a crack in the wall of the cave. I turned and scurried off back towards daylight, looping the cord behind me as I stumbled over the rubble of previous attempts. This was my routine all day, every day.
As we marched, I could see the fort, a small strip of beach, 50, maybe 60 yards wide, with the wicked Atlantic to the east and Vincent's Marsh to the west. Initially, I could smell the ocean, which was puzzling. How could we fight on such a pleasant place? But as we approached, the air thickened with the smell of blood and gunpowder. I heard a man yell, "Give him hell, 54th!" as we made our way to the front lines. A heavy gunshot rang my ears, and Colonel Robert Gouldshaw yelled, "Charge!" As I jumped into battle, the spray of bullets and the thick eye-burning gunpowder made the presence of war and death known. I quickly came to the conclusion that survival was as thin as the picture of my wife in my pocket and the letters that Lewis Douglas had given
I
me.
can see the approach to the fort, a small strip of beach, 50, maybe 60 yards wide, with the wicked Atlantic to the east and Vincent's Marsh to the west. We have a 250-yard march to the south face of Fort Wagner, which the scouts say is surrounded by a shallow moat set with sharpened palmetto logs and planks with spikes positioned beneath the water. This is the same water as Fort Sumter, and the first shots of the war so long ago. At first, we were just walking. But within 150 yards of the fort, Taliaferro yells, "Fire!" as he crested the flaming parapet. Shaw waved his sword, shouted, "Forward 54th," and then pitched headlong into the sand.
If you were in Hamburg, Georgia during the times of peace and prosperity, you would have seen the growing predominantly black community of Hamburg. African Americans owned farms, land, and even stores. Kids were able to play with little danger, and there was even a militia that black men could join. With this all-black militia, our town was protected, and we performed military drills throughout the town to minimize any problems that may arise. Walking through the streets of Hamburg in the searing heat of the summer, you can see newly freed slaves working hard at work and doing what they can for a better life for themselves and their kids.
His voice rang out, confident and unwavering.
I was remarking that we are passing through one of the greatest revolutions in the annals of the world,
He declared, his words echoing through the chamber, laden with significance. It was Alexander H. Stephens' words that continued to flow like a mighty river, carrying the weight of history and hatred with them.
Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests, upon the great truth that the slave is not equal to the white man, that slavery's subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition.
My heart sank as I listened. These words were not just a defense of slavery, but a rallying cry for a war effort. The room, though not divided in belief, was being meticulously convinced of the necessity of this revolution.
Told us the Indian ways were bad. They said we must get civilized, embrace religion and farming. I remember that word too. It means be like the white man. I am willing to be like the white man, but I do not believe Indian ways were wrong. The books told us how bad the Indians had been to the white men, burning their towns and killing their women and children. But I had seen white men do that to Indians. We all wore white man's clothes and ate white man's food and went to white man's churches and spoke white man's talk.
In 1828, gold was discovered in Cherokee soil. This discovery prompted Andrew Jackson to remove the Cherokees from their homeland and claim their territory, starting in 1829. This was accomplished by the Treaty of Nuakata, which gave the Cherokee people $5 million in exchange for 7 million acres of ancestral land. Despite most Cherokee people opposing the treaty, including Cherokee Chief John Ross, the United States ratified the document in March of 1836. As the forced displacement continued, the Cherokees were continually forced to migrate onward. Eventually, with nowhere left to go, problems between the United States government and the Nez Perce people occurred. In June 1877, after refusing the government's orders to move to a reservation, a battle ensued.